I've got this kind of anecdote, like Stephen Henschke, like every year, you know, when he does the Hill of Grace tasting to a, you know, small amount of extraordinarily lucky people. I mean, he's crying. Stephen is literally tearing up, talking about what the Hill of Grace means to him and that kind of thing. I mean, what personally, what is the Caley? It's, you know, it's the family name. What does it mean to you personally?
Yeah, I've heard those stories about Stephen before too, and I think when you've been making a wine for so long and it's got so much history attached to it, there's this extra level of complexity and pressure almost to make the best wine you can, and we see that with the signature, and just talking about what that means and how important it is. And then with the Caley, this 2015, which we'll release officially on the 1st of July, is only the 4th release of the Caley. So our inaugural release was 2017 with the very good 2012 vintage. Yeah. But this wine for me, I wasn't working in the business, but I remember hearing about the wine being created and the story behind who Fred Caley Smith was. And the legend of Fred was really lost in our archives until about 10 years ago. We moved the staircase that went up to the top of the clock tower. And if you've been to Yalumba, you know our clock tower building, and you can go right up to the top, which is where the flagpole is, and we changed the flag for different visitors that are coming to the winery. And the staircase that went up there had to be moved, and underneath the stairs we found this suitcase full of old letters. And these letters were written by Fred Caley Smith in 1893, writing home to his father, Sydney, who was second generation Smith in the Yalumba family. And he was telling his father all about his global travels. And he set out on a 2-year expedition around the world to really learn about what was going on in horticulture and viticulture in different countries. And it was sort of a fact-finding mission to share with us back at Yalumba to help us sort of get to the next level of winemaking. And at the time, canning fruit from our orchards. So this story had been lost, and when we discovered it, we realized what an important role Fred had played in our history books, and I think such an important role in the way that we farm sustainably and the way that we tend to all our viticulture around the area. So it was fitting that when we were looking at, I guess, making our cross-regional Coonawarra Cabernet Barossa Shiraz blend, that we looked back in history to someone that had really shaped our destiny. So the name, the Caley, felt very fitting to dedicate our new flagship, our new icon wine after him, and dedicate that to all the work that he had done.
And I mean, did you feel any, I mean, for you personally, you're in the UK at the time, like, did you feel you missed out a little, you know, not being a part of that moment of the you know,
yeah, I
fruition?
Now that I'm here and I'm looking back at what we did for that launch and how much went into putting that together and how important it was, I wish that I was here. I'm envious of the wines that were opened at that launch event because it sounded pretty special. But I think it was really exciting for me to see us really put our stamp on what we felt was an icon wine, and to be considered amongst the benchmarks of Australian wine. Yep. Sometimes the Yalumba name wasn't in that list, and I think this is our take on what we believe is a benchmark Australian wine, and obviously it's going to be Coonawarra Cabernet and Barossa Shiraz, and that great claret blend, which we've sort of nicknamed the Caley a super claret, which we can't officially say, but I think it's just been a really important and an exciting time for us.
Yeah, and it's been a long time coming, I guess, really, hasn't it? In many ways, like the Reserve. Exactly. The Reserve was a cracking wine, but I guess Reserve doesn't have quite the same power as a name, does it?
Yeah, exactly. And it was released very ad hoc in different years, and there was no real story for the Reserve apart from the fact it was Eden Valley fruit. So in that 2012 vintage, when the the wine really came about. It was a chance to really look at doing something different and revisiting those great wines of the past that were the cross-regional blends of Cabernet and Shiraz.
Yeah. And I think the flexibility, I think a lot of places feel they need to be beholden to a single region. I think, they really feel that. Whereas I think in your business, it's, it's often been a blending, a blending business in some ways. And that allows you to have that flexibility and bring the good stuff together, I guess.
Yeah.
Exactly. The vintage, how do you see the vintage, KG, of this? How do you, and compared to the others?
15 compared to the previous 3, very much like the 15 signature. It gives us a little bit more. 15, there is always a little bit of difference between Coonawarra and Barossa in most years. Obviously in the some wet years or cool years, you can have quite big differences, but 15 was reasonably similar vintage conditions wise. It just gave us a little bit more richness and generosity. Yep. Look, I think that the 15 is a great progression. I can't believe we're actually talking about the 15 now, because it seems to have flown so quickly since the 12 was first released. But the attraction of 12, 13 and 14, 12 was all about the aromatic and the length and the pristine tannin flow. Yep. 13 was all about its structure and its savouriness and its presence. Yep. In the glass. The 14 was about its screaming Coonawarra aromatically and lovely, generous mid-palate. Not generous in alcohol, but just generosity of the palate. 15, I think, has got those 3 wrapped up in the one together at the same time, which is, this has got lovely aromatics. It's not as punchy as the 12, but it certainly screams Coonawarra, but in a more, I think, a more profound way. It really does show a stylish Coonawarra. But where Caley, I think, really shines is the palate. And what we've always worked on is getting the right Shiraz to fit Caley. And because it's a smaller volume and a top end, absolute top end wine, we want the Shiraz to really fit the palate of the Cabernet. Yep. And whilst when we're doing other wines, you've got bigger, bolder, more structure, but what you're looking for in Caley is the finesse of the palate. So you don't want the Shiraz to be too bold. So the vineyards that we've selected have really, they get the ripeness, but without that overt generosity. So they'll really fit when you blend the 2 together. So the very simple way for me to describe it is Cabernet tends to flow down the mouth like train tracks, and you'll have the support of tannins down the side of the mouth. Yep. Shiraz fits inside that and just fills that evenly all the way along. Yep. And I think that's what we really aim for with Caley, whereas certainly signature, we don't mind if it fills it out a little bit more, because that's the signature style, but we're really looking for that bright finesse and flow of tannin all the way to give it extra length primarily for longer term cellaring.
I mean, I'd love to balance this wine. I just think for me, that's the kind of standout feature, is how you're exactly right, how it all comes together. You've got the brightness, but they're not hugely bright aromatics. You've got the structure, you've got the fleshiness. It just sits beautifully, I think, as a complete package rather than anything kind of standing out. And they're the wines they're the ones that go. They're the ones that really kind of sing for a long period of time.
And I think the secret for all of these 3 wines is certainly open them 3, 4, 5 hours before you plan to really drink them. Yeah. Even opening them the night before, as you've done. Yeah. And not leave them in an open glass or anything like that, but just decant them into another bottle or into a decanter, and then put it back into the bottle and just leave it, because that double decant really puts the air into it and just manages to bind to the tannins and the phenolics and just soften it a little bit, so that when you do come to drink it, the wine still displays all the beauty, but it's just in a more drinkable format.
I agree.